Good morning. What did everybody think of that party last night? Yeah? Did anybody get in the pool?
Was there a pool?
There was a pool. Oh, you didn't go. I was hanging out with some folks on my team, and I kept saying, let's get in the pool. And everyone thought I was crazy. And then this morning I ran into some folks downstairs, and they said, oh yeah, we saw people get in the pool. I guess I was just there too early, maybe. I don't know. Oh, so Bridget here saw people dancing in the pool. So it sounds, yeah, I missed out. So I'm Ben Lauer, and I'm Tableau's director of our developer platform. So that is the collection of APIs that we make available. And it is my pleasure to be here today to introduce this session. So some of you may know our Zen masters here. To my right, Chris DeMartini, and to my left is Tomas Foldy. You're going to hear from them here in a moment. But it's these Zen masters that we have, and especially people like Chris and Tomas, that are doing such innovative work with our platform. I always can rely on them to Slack me and the team when they have a question, when they have feedback. They tell us things they like and that they think are cool, and they also are very transparent when we need to do things better and differently. And not only are you going to see some of the amazing innovations that they create that benefit you and the whole Tableau community, but again, these things push us as Tableau to be better and to do more and to continue to innovate and provide an even bigger platform and a canvas upon which they can do their great work. So Chris, I just want to acknowledge you. I know you personally have such vision and passion, and you spend nights and weekends, I don't even know how many weeks, but I think it's probably measured more in months, leading up to TC to prepare and really show something amazing. And Tomas, man, I remember our first conversation when I joined Tableau about 4.5 years ago, and everyone said, hey, you got to talk to Tomas. And we got on a phone call. You were in Budapest at the time. And the first thing you said to me, hey, Ben, nice to meet you. You sound like a good guy. And I got to tell you, when it comes to APIs, Tableau is crap. And he really signaled to me, or you signaled to me, just the type of relationship we were going to have. And you all are laughing, but I'm telling you, we are really friends, and we celebrate together, and he keeps pushing us, like I said. So I acknowledge you, and I thank you so much for just your vision and your commitment and making Tableau and the platform so much better. Yes. So with that, enough from me, but I just want all of you to really understand you are about to hear from the best. We are going to learn. I saw this session on Tuesday, and it blew my mind. So you are all in for a real treat today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Yep. Thank you, Ben. Thanks, everybody, for being here with us today. Tomas and I are really excited to show you some of the things we've been working on. And with that, I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. So during the day, I run the amazing data visualization team over at Visa. And we help our business partners build consumable and intuitive products for our internal and external clients. At night, I play dad to these 3 wonderful girls on screen. I also work with Datablick on the nights and weekends doing like R&D and nonprofit type work, and you'll see a lot of my public-facing contributions on the Datablick blog. I also have been a Tableau Zen Master since 2016, and I like to think of myself as like a wannabe night owl developer, and I get this trait directly from my mother, who after she retired decided it was going to be fun to take some Java programming classes. So I think that's definitely where I get that from. It's a true story. I often am found trying to combine my passions. So I'm really passionate about my kids, and I love data viz, so I often am found coercing my kids into doing data viz projects with me. And so here's one example where they have just a ridiculous amount of stuffed animals, as I'm sure those who have kids probably have experienced this. And so I talked them into working with me to like collate and categorize their stuffed animals and just start to tally like how many stuffed animals do we have. We tracked that all down. They drew data visualizations themselves on paper, and then I spent the rest of the evening putting all that data into the computer, building a Tableau visualization, publishing it on Tableau Public, and writing a blog about it, because that's what I do. The best part about the story, though, isn't, well, all that was fun, but one thing that happened is the next day I walked out in the garage and found a whole nother bin of stuffed animals. So that's not even all the stuffed animals they have. They have more, and it's only grown since then. And I've also started to do this in my work life, too. So we had Bring Your Child to Work Day recently, and I had my girls come in, and it happened to fall on the day that we do our demos for the data visualization team. And so my kids actually built a Tableau dashboard from a Pokemon data set, and they demoed that to my team during our team demo. So that was really fun for me, and I appreciate the team playing along with me on that one. All right. So that's enough about me. And you'll find that I'm not huge on PowerPoint slides, so there's going to be a very demo-heavy session, so hopefully those will all work out for us today. I wanted to start off by saying, like, what do Tomas and I mean when we say take something to the extreme? And so I have an old project that we worked on back in 2017 that I'm going to try and run for you here. I will admit it uses voice recognition and response. Sometimes it can be a little finicky in big rooms like this, so if it doesn't, I have a way to demonstrate it without the voice recognition, but let's try that. Make sure it's listening. Tabitha, show example.
Sure, preparing my first example now. Try commands like Tabitha, select Yoda. This workbook is named Star Wars and has 3 sheets published. It appears to have 3 parameters. The author has provided the following description. Star Words was created by Matt Francis and used by Jeffrey Schaffer for the initial Tabitha example. Each line represents 1 line of dialogue. The length of the bar is the length of the line. Select a character to see where in the films they spoke.
Tabitha, select Yoda.
Selecting character Yoda now.
And so that's a project that I did. It builds off work that Jeff Schaefer did and blogged about as well. And the reason why I did that was because I was thinking about the idea of, wouldn't it be great if you could take your dashboard that you're publishing on Tableau Public and actually introduce or explain it to whoever is viewing it, whether they're sitting in the room from you or across the world. And so ultimately what that project is that I was showing you is it builds off some work others have done in the community. And I basically exposed to you as a Tableau Public developer like an API via Tableau parameters where you can actually use that today. You can go add a couple parameters to your workbook, and you can use this URL, which is just a GitHub Pages URL. And people can visit your page or your Tableau dashboard and get an explanation from you of how to read the Tableau dashboard. And so that project actually uses the JavaScript API. And what we're going to talk more about the rest of the session today is the extension API. And so I like to talk about them somewhat together, but they do different things. The JavaScript API is going to be something that you use to embed or integrate Tableau into other programs. And the extensions API is something that you're going to use to embed or integrate programs within Tableau. So that's the way that you want to think about those 2 things. There's a bunch of great help documentation that the extensions team has put out on their GitHub page. So I'm not going to go through in the session today like how to get up and running and building an extension. What we're going to try and do is focus on showing you some content in terms of how you could take advantage of the extensions API. So here's a couple references that you can check out. The first demo that I'm going to do for you today is an extension that we actually released on the gallery about 2 weeks ago. And so this is leveraging an open source project that's built by Uber called Kepler GL. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But before I get too far into it, I want to just say a quick thanks to some of the people whose hands are on this, who helped me get this content to the room today. So first and foremost is Shan from Uber. So she's the creator of Kepler GL. And she also worked with me quite a bit over the last year to try and make sure that the integration between Kepler GL and Tableau was really solid. So I just can't thank her enough for all of her commits and pull requests along the way. Tomas and Abraham, so we worked together, the 3 of us, to build basically like an extension framework that allows us to build extensions more quickly. So everything I'm showing you today leverages that framework, and their hands are on us being able to use that. And then lastly, Alan and Jeff, so they both provided content and gave me permission to use it in the demos, so I just want to say thanks to them for that. Back to Kepler GL. So it is an open source geospatial analysis tool for large-scale data sets. And I think the best way to show this would be to actually go ahead and do some demos. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it's like to get up and running on the Kepler GL extension. So I'll start with this dashboard I have. It has a data set over here in the corner that's very near and dear to my heart. This is the hit locations from the game 5 of the 2014 NLCS. The Giants won the game in the bottom of the 9th inning with a home run. And I was at the game, and I was very excited. So it's a very near and dear data set for me. In order to create an extension on the dashboard, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop the extension object. And from there, you can either go to the gallery to download what they refer to as a T-Rex file, or you can go ahead and just pull one off your computer. For speed's sake here, I'm just going to grab it from my computer. And I'm grabbing my Kepler GL extension here. Once you do that, what Tableau is going to do is that file actually has a pointer out to a URL. So it's going to go to that URL, download all the JavaScript into your dashboard, and start running it, which is what just happened. And from here, you're going to be presented with most extensions with some type of like configuration flow. You got to help Tableau tell the extension what it wants it to do, basically. So I'm going to click Configure. And the Kepler configuration is actually really easy because Kepler comes with a pretty good UI that we're going to take advantage of. So we're just going to do some very simple configurations for the Kepler extension. First thing you need for Kepler is a data source. So I'll go ahead and pick this sheet on the bottom right. And then I'll come back and talk about the rest of these configurations in a little bit. So with that, we now have Kepler GL running in Tableau. It was that easy. And from here, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start plotting some of this data on the map. You can see that my data is loaded here. And I'm going to add a layer. This is just straight how Kepler GL works. I didn't really do much of this. I'm just leveraging their product. So I'm going to create a point layer, and I'm going to map my hit locations to it. So my latitude and longitude. You may not notice it right off the bat, but I actually did start to plot some data on the screen. And so there's some things that you can do in Kepler that you can't really do in Tableau, or if you did do them in Tableau, it would be quite an effort to get it done. So I'll demonstrate one of those here. I just flipped the map into 3D view. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add an arc layer on top of the points. So the arc layer is a standard layer in Kepler. And I'm going to have this go from the pitch location to the hit location. And again, I'm just mapping longitude and latitude here. And with that, I now have arcs going from home plate to where those balls landed. So let's just like cooking show this, right? So pretend I put this in the oven, and then it comes out on the other side, and it looks like this with data on it. And so here is what it could ultimately look like. So this map style is one that actually Alan Walker built for me, so thank you, Alan. I actually was way too excited about the fact that I created little white baseballs with red laces. And that really is just something where I was able to do a lot of layering in Kepler to create like a baseball icon and then put a red circle under it. But that's just one example of being able to leverage this. And then there is interactivity between the Kepler view and Tableau, and I'll talk more about that interactivity here in a second. So this next one, this is really just a demonstration of the scale that Kepler can handle. Because of the technologies that they use in Kepler GL, I'm actually mapping 293,000 data points from Tableau to the Kepler GL extension here, and it can render it. So pretty scalable. Again, this demonstration is from Alan, pretty much. Let me refresh these. Not sure why that's not happening. Okay, so this demonstration here, this is where I'm really going to hit on a lot of the interactivity that Shannon and I work so hard for. So this is focused on, if we are going to use Kepler GL and Tableau, like one big thing for me in extensions is I want the extension to feel as if it's part of the Tableau like process. I don't want you to feel like you're in Tableau and then you jump out into this other universe and do something and come back. I want it to feel like you're in the flow of Tableau when you're using some of these extensions. And so what I have on the page here is, this is a data set from the Data Visualization Society. They had a kind of anonymized data set that they put out, which tracked where people were when they signed up for the society. I manipulated it a little bit for demonstration purposes today, but ultimately that's what it is. And on the top left here, I have a hex bin map of the data from the Data Visualization Society. On the right, I'm using the arc layer that I just demonstrated to you. And on the bottom left, I have this scatter plot thing in Tableau, and on the bottom right, I have a Tableau map. So I have 2 instances of Kepler and 2 Tableau sheets involved. And ultimately, one of the things that I want to point out is one of the things that Kepler provides is this hex bin and square grid capability. How many people in this room have tried to use the hex bin function in Tableau? How many people who have used that have then tried to like zoom in and out of their map and started crying? Almost everybody, right. So I'm here to help you. And basically, what I'm going to demonstrate for you here is you can zoom in and out of this thing all you want, and there's no issues with the hex bin. What's really cool about this is Kepler is doing the aggregation of that hex bin on the fly. So I'm just sending it data, and I'm telling it how big I want the bin to be, and it's just rendering what I'm asking. And why that matters, what really matters with that is, even though Kepler is the only thing on this page that knows this hex bin and how big it is and what's in it, Tableau doesn't know anything about that. But because we're able to do this from the underlying data, we can actually talk back to Tableau when we're hovering or interacting with these hex bins that are being built by Kepler. So you can see as I'm mousing over this, that the Tableau sheets below are updating as a result of that. So let me talk really quick about how that's done, just to give you a sneak peek. So in the configuration, we basically have, if you're familiar with like worksheet or dashboard actions, it's basically like something similar to that, where we can decide whether we're going to highlight or filter, and then we're going to pick a field that we're going to do that action on. And we can set that for hover and click on Kepler, and then also from Tableau back to Kepler as well. Let me just go ahead and save that so it'll re-render. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start interacting with the Tableau views, and you'll see the Kepler views are also updating as well. So it's not just something where I have like a one-way communication from Kepler to Tableau. It's very much something where I have the ability to interact with Tableau and Kepler together as if they were part of the same ecosystem. So I was really excited about the way we were able to do this interactivity in the extension. So I think it'll bring a lot of value to how people can use the extension going forward. The last demo I'm going to do in desktop is this one now. It needs to reload, so it's going to take a minute to reload. And while it's doing that, I'll talk to what it's ultimately doing. Kepler comes basically out of the box with the ability to do animation over time. So if you have a time element to your geospatial data, you can actually see that data play out over time out of the box. And so this is something that I think is actually pretty neat. They have this example on the Kepler demo page. So this is straight off Kepler's demo page. I literally took it, tried to recreate it in Tableau as a challenge to see whether or not I could get it done. And this is drop-off and pickups in New York City. And ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm going to use their time playback function here. I'm going to speed it up a little bit just for the sake of speeding it up. And I'm going to go ahead and run that. And so you can see the animation taking place over the time. When you get to the middle of the night, there's a big dip in the pickups and drop-offs in New York, and then it picks back up throughout the day. But it gets better than this. This is desktop. Everybody's hit the play button in desktop, and it works. It's all good. That's exciting. But it actually works just as good, if not better, on Tableau server. And so you can now see this playback effect happening not only in desktop, but also on server. And it also works on mobile too. So I'm going to try at the end of my session if I have enough time to plug my phone in, and we'll see if we can get it to work from there too. The last demo I have for you for Kepler is this one. And this leverages a beautiful viz that Jeff Schaefer pushed to Tableau Public. And it looks at the routes that trash trucks take in Cincinnati to pick up all the trash in the area. And it's a beautiful static visualization of those routes. And I thought it'd be really cool to see if we could use some of the Kepler features to animate those routes and see how they go. And so what we're using here is the trip layer, which is very new to Kepler. It came out like less than a month ago that they actually added it into Kepler. We were able to basically upgrade the instance of Kepler that we're using in our extension, and we got the trip layer for free. The cool thing about this is the trip layer takes GeoJSON in. So if anybody's tried to use Tableau's APIs to query GeoJSON data from Tableau Desktop, you've probably realized that you don't get GeoJSON data back. You get like a centroid, and that's it. So what I did is I actually recreated GeoJSON in Tableau using table calculations. So I create a bunch of table calculations, basically create a GeoJSON object, and then I send that into Kepler GL. And so I'll go ahead and play this. I should have done that while I was talking. And so you can see the trucks and the routes that they take throughout the day. So the trip layer is super cool. There's some more demos on Kepler GL about that layer as well. But I was really excited with how this one turned out. OK. So Kepler GL, like I said, the extension is available in the extension gallery today. You can all go download it right now if you want. You can bring it, drag it, drop it onto your data. As long as you have some type of latitude, longitude, you'll be able to take advantage of it. And just so you know as well, the repo, the source code that we're using to run the extension is also open sourced. It's on the Kepler GL namespace on GitHub. So it's like a partner repo to Kepler GL itself. And so that's where it's going to be maintained. And that's where you could also like submit, like if you have an issue or if you have an idea of ways that we can make the extension better, that would be the best place to submit those. And this is my 5-year-old watching that trip layer play while I was preparing. All right, demo 1, done. Yeah, so I try to convince them that it's entertaining. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes they'll get into it, and other times they want to watch a show or something. The next thing I'm going to demo for you today is something I call Annotate All of the Tableau Things. And so this really goes after this pain point, which is looking at how we can go about creating like custom annotations in Tableau. You'll see people on Tableau Public already. They're doing incredible things with like 40 images and 30 text boxes and all this craziness to actually end up with something that's really beautiful. But if you look at the underlying detail of how they went about creating that thing, it's pretty painful. And so like what I thought I could do is try to take a look if there's any available libraries that I could use to help solve this problem. So it's a very iterative approach. If you're going through the old method of using images and text boxes, you have to go back and forth in and out of Tableau to try and get the pixelation of the image correct and all this stuff, and it gets pretty painful. So real quick before I go further, let me just give a couple shout out here. Susie Liu from Netflix, she's the creator of the library I'm using, which is React Annotation. It's a fantastic piece of work. She also develops D3 annotation. And so ultimately what it is an API that you can use to create SVG annotations. That's ultimately what it is. And so she, of course, did the majority of the work that I need to do to be able to create this extension. And then obviously, I'm using that same framework that I mentioned earlier that I built with Tomas and Abraham. So again, just a little more on React Annotation. It provides you with a way to build annotations on top of your dashboard. And let's just jump into some demos. Oh, by the way, here's the gallery, and here's Kepler right here. All right. So for the demos, this is a dashboard I built earlier this year, and it's built to show the results of the men's D1 college golf championship. And that tournament itself is extremely long and arduous. Stanford won it this year. And it's 4 rounds of stroke play, followed by like a playoff bracket-like match play across the teams. So I was amazed by how much golf these teams have to play to win the championship. It's crazy. And so what I wanted to do was, this is a very complex and dense visualization. So the first thing I challenged myself with the annotation extension is, can I use the annotation extension to explain this very dense, complex dashboard to my readers? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle on a layer that leverages the annotation extension. And so you can see I'm able to create all different types of annotations using this extension. There's no images, there's no text boxes. It's just a layer with customized annotations on top of it. And so what I'll do now is I'll show you what it would take to, like, let's say we want to add one more. So I'm going to go ahead and go into add mode. And I'll select over here. And from here, I can select any one of these annotation types. So these are the different types of annotations that Susie Liu exposes via her API. So I'm just going to keep it on circle for now. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and start making changes to all sorts of different types of props or configurations for the annotation. So I change the color to this green. I can change the note. You can see I've been practicing. I already have high TC in there. So I can change this to be black. New annotation. That's all good. So there's my annotation. So that's what it takes to get a new annotation layered on your dashboard. But it gets better because that's just whatever it is. I want to make changes to that. So I can switch from add to edit mode. And now I have the ability to drag this wherever I want. I can make the circle bigger. I can drag the note to where I want the note to go. I can hide it in case maybe there's an annotation that I'm in the process of doing, but I don't want to expose it yet. So I can click that to hide it and bring it back when I'm in edit mode. I can go back in and edit it. I don't really like that red on the inside of that. And maybe I want to use a color other than this green because it's kind of hard to see. So let's not use black. Let's use gray. And then I'll take the fill and let's make that like a light gray. And then I'm going to go back and make it a rectangle. One of the things that I was really excited about, and Susie helped me get this done before I got here, is you can select a couple different types of connectors. Connector is this line that's going from the subject, which is like the circle, to the note, which is where the text is. And so the connector, you can do a couple really cool things there, like you can completely customize the connector. And so I just made all those changes to that annotation, as you can see. And what I'm going to do now is show you how you can make this line like whatever you want. If you were to do this in in PowerPoint or some other program, it would take a lot of back and forth to figure that out. With the annotation extension, you can be very creative in terms of what your annotations look like, and you can do that just right on top of your viz. You don't even have to leave Tableau. So the last thing I did is, you've seen that dialog box pop up a couple times. And there's an add dialog, there's an edit dialog. And I thought when you want to remove your extension, you probably don't want to have to click through all that stuff just to say, yes, I want to, or your annotation, sorry. Yes, I want to remove my annotation. So you can click the trash bin to pop up the dialog, but with a different use. This is just like a confirmation dialog that you can use, and so I can go ahead and confirm that and remove the annotation that I had added previously. And so from here, I can go ahead and see if I can tell not only an example of how does this dashboard work, but I can also use this to tell a specific story about the dashboard. So Vanderbilt was one that I realized after I created the dashboard. This team started out really, really poorly and had this massive climb, shooting even par or better for multiple days in a row to get all the way back into second place before the stroke play qualifier ended. So that was really fun to be able to tell that. Two more things. This dashboard is one that I built to try and course my kids again. And this is looking at the script from the movie Frozen. It's actually inspired by some work The Pudding did, where they were looking at gender representation in movies and the fact that males speak way more in Disney movies than women. And so I wanted to see, with Frozen being a story about the two sisters, what was the representation there. And so that's really the genesis of this dashboard. But for the purposes of today, I initially, when I built this, I pulled in the images and everything like that from PowerPoint or something like that to make some curved lines to annotate this is the parameter that will change the fractal or whatever that is. So I replaced all that. There's an annotation layer on top of this dashboard. But what I want to demonstrate to you is we can actually, with this extension, we can actually allow you to click through that annotation. So I don't know if you've ever tried to and refresh the screen. Oh, I know what happened. It timed out. Okay, let's let it reload. It'll take a second. Because I have all those same keys in there, it takes a little while to load. Okay, so what you can do now is you can actually interact with the parameter below the annotation. So there is an annotation on top of that parameter, but I'm able to click through it. So if you've ever tried to use a text box on top of something on Tableau, you realize you then can no longer interact with it. That's a problem that we're solving here. And so you can see I iterated my fractal down to 2 from 4, and then I can also scroll down here and select Elsa. And that will also allow me to update the dashboard as well. And last challenge I gave myself with annotations. So does anybody know who Johnny Walker is? Not the Scotch. The creative visualization Johnny Walker. So he's a friend of mine, and he gave me permission to use this in my demo today. He's an extremely, extremely talented visualization builder, creator, whatever you want to call it. And he does some amazing things with maps. And so he had this one visualization. I basically challenged myself with, if I can use the annotation extension to do the annotations that Johnny Walker did on a viz, then I've accomplished something, because that's a pretty complicated level of use. So that was really the goal here. And what I'm just showing you a carbon copy of one of his dashboards, but I ripped all of his annotations out. There's no images, there's no text boxes. This is all just the annotation extension that's doing all these annotations throughout. The annotation extension is available on the community portal. So the Kepler GL is on the gallery, and the annotation extension is on the Tableau community extension portal, which is on the GitHub page for Tableau Extension API. From there, I think that's going to say the same thing. Yes, so from there, okay. Last thing I want to try, Tomas, you can go ahead and head up, is you can use annotations on mobile, I said. Let's see if I can prove it. So this is that same dashboard I showed you on server, on my phone. And you can see the animation for Kepler works pretty well on that as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. I got that for free. I wasn't expecting this. But I thought since it worked, I might as well try to demo it. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Tomas, who's going to take you down the rabbit hole. Thank you all for your...
All right, so welcome everyone. I'm Tomas Foldy, one of the Zen Masters one of the Tableau Zen Masters since a few years, maybe 4 years, I guess. So what I'm doing during the day, I'm some sort of CTO, but you know, nobody really knows what a CTO does. I'm working in this company since 12 years, so that's the best title I can get in that time. We are doing high-level consultation services for those companies who can actually afford those kind of services, mostly in data engineering and data visualization, including and specializing on Tableau. At night, since I have to do some practicing, I do a lot of hobby projects, mostly in Tableau and in programming languages which have absolutely no business value in the world. So I'm doing a lot of useless things at my night just to practice some stuff. Last year, so fun fact, I moved here to the States like 1.5 years ago to Northern Virginia from Hungary, Budapest. And last year I had this slide that when I moved here, I tried to be as American as possible, go to the suburb, have a big track, have the US flag on my front porch. So I can, you know, socialize with my neighborhoods. We have like common things, going to shooting distances and stuff. But after a year, I realized, or after a few months, that I don't necessarily need a track to be a cool guy. So I switched to an electric skateboard, and as you can see, I also have kids who are also trying to go to the school in a very effective carbon neutral way. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. That was the introduction part, and now let's switch to the hardcore stuff. So this is a Jedi session. It's a development session. So I assume that everyone is as hardcore as I am. So when we prepared this presentation with Chris, I saw his fantastic annotation dashboard, but what I'm usually doing with my customers, they have a different annotation problem. So it's like one of the things that how you are putting graphics and annotation on top of the dashboard, like what Chris does. But there is another use case, like how can you actually annotate the marks and how can you give comments to actual data points which are making sense. So the problem with the existing annotation and the built-in annotation in Tableau is let me just start a new Tableau. It's running. So the problem with the built-in annotation that, let me show it. So let me open my favorite data store, which is, I guess, your favorite data source as well. and quickly create a nice dashboard, maybe the best what I can do, and try to annotate one data point. So as I can see, the consumer segment generates 1.1 million revenue. Let's create an annotation here. Go get some drinks. We made like 1.1 million. So this is great so far. I was able to annotate a mark. But what happens if I'm trying to do some filtering? Obviously, the value changes. So the annotation, what I made, doesn't make sense anymore. But it's still there. And most of the other annotation extensions out of the wild are actually working in the same way. So one of my clients asked the question, can we create like an extension annotation which is really annotate the things what we expect, the mark, and take in consideration the filters? And obviously, I'm that kind of guy who says always yes to a client. We can figure it out how to deliver it later on. But usually, I'm not really good in saying no, especially if they are paying for it. So let me show how we solve this problem. This is like a nice looking dashboard. It was designed by Yvette. It was you who made it. Thanks. So the reason why it's looking relatively great, because it wasn't designed by me, designed by Yvette. And it looks like a really ordinary dashboard. We have some analogy narratives generated by AI, which is not AI, obviously, but some statistical algorithms. I can just select things, and it really works well. So it's like a typical extension use case to generate natural language to explain what's going on. But sometimes computers cannot generate as fancy annotation as human beings, like myself. So let me check if I can add my own annotation to this dashboard. So when I click to this point, I can add an annotation. And I can say that this is 23 million and add like a color just to make sure that we can see that the value is written back. So this is what every other annotation can do. So what happens if I change the filters? For instance, I remove oil and gas. After the filter changed, my annotation disappeared. And I can also create like a new text here. And it will work. Now I'm not that, I'm a bit lazier with the annotation. So basically, as you can see, it's only relevant for these selected filters. If I'm going back and select everything, then it will change the annotation back. So thank you, Ben. So the question is that how does this stuff working? So how we were able to do this? Obviously, it's not a rocket science because no rockets are involved. So what's this single trick is basically we are getting all the filters from the using the extension API and save it to our backend database along with the actual comments and annotations. And whenever we are rendering the dashboard, we read back the filter set from the actual filter selection and apply as an additional filter on this data source. So this allows us to show something really relevant to the selected and annotated mark. And I can't wait Tableau to implement it as a default feature for the default annotations. So let's switch some topics and show our way to complete the extension API. So extension API is a pretty cool stuff, but obviously there are some things where we need more functionality. So the question is that how can we add more functionality to the extension API? Let's do some demo here. I picked one of the most requested features from the Tableau ideas, not dynamic parameters, obviously, because it was solved by Keisha like a year ago, as we discussed. So it's not dynamic parameters is not an issue anymore. Let me check like the custom scroll control. So Klaus, who is another Zen master, made a blog post about how can you create like synchronized scrolling in Tableau. So this is like one of the points where Tableau is not necessarily good if you have two different sheets and you want to scroll the two sheets together. And the only way which is working out of the box, that you can create an index and put a parameter on top of the index. So whenever you change the parameter, then it's supposed to scroll. Yeah, it's just not that visible. So as you can see, if I change this parameter, the sheet scrolls. But to be honest, this is not necessarily the way how it's supposed to work. So when I try to check for use cases for my extension add-ons, this was the first what I picked. And I built an extension add-on, which completes the extension API, where I was able to create like a really smooth synchronized scrolling, which is pretty cool. If I visit the page source, because it's a Jedi session, and if you don't see any source code, then it doesn't really, count. View frame source. As you can see, it's relatively easy and clean. We initialize the extension API, and then we initialize the add-ons. The fun fact that there is no such function in the extension API. So this is something what I built by myself, like an extension to the extension API, where you can dynamically load plugins to the extension API to do things which require cross-domain access. Switching back to PowerPoint. So the way how it works is basically when I'm using this initialize add-ons async, it loads two JavaScripts. One JavaScript is loaded in the extension frame. One JavaScript is loaded in the VSQL frame. It creates a window messaging channel. So basically, I can create new functionalities in the VSQL frame, like scrolling things and accessing data which is not available for the extension frame itself. So practically, I can do anything like without deploying new stuff on my server. So I went through and implemented other use cases. So one of my other most requested feature from my clients is the username and a way to actually authenticate the extension API users. So I made a nice dashboard called Superstore Overview. And what it does is using this new getUserInfo function add-on, extension add-on, which returns with the workgroup session ID and the VSQL session ID, so the extension itself and also the username. So basically, I can pass these session IDs and the usernames to my backend. The backend can log on to the Tableau repository and validate if the session and the username are valid. So it can make sure that the extension is really running on an authenticated Tableau session with a specific user. I think it's pretty cool. Let's see something more practical, I would say. So real-time data in Tableau. We have a lot of requests from our clients that can we do real-time data visualization in Tableau without refreshing the dashboards and refreshing the data sources, because it takes a lot of effort from the server, and they really want to see real-time data. And the way how they like to see that we have a chart and the historical data is coming from Tableau, and from the point where the data stops coming from Tableau, like the highest date from the Tableau dashboard, anything after needs to get retrieved from a web service, most probably from a WebSocket, which can push the new data into the extension and visualize it without getting things refreshed. Let me open. Let me really demonstrate it to you with the famous dashboard one dashboard. Working from the sheet one sheet. So this is like a real-time chart from the Yeah, it's working, just not too many things are happening here. So this is like Bitcoin prices, and then the top, you can see that that's like the Tableau dashboard, and that's where I'm getting the data. And on the bottom, this does really look like a Tableau visualization, but it's actually a D3 visualization designed exactly the same, with exactly the same look and feel. And it takes the data with get data until we have data in the dashboard, and everything after is retrieved from a WebSocket. So it's basically really responsive. You don't really see the spinner. It doesn't have to refresh and hit your data source. It's showing real-time values. And obviously, you can do better visualization than the blue line chart. I mean, I'm not sure if you can do, but there is definitely a way to make it more compelling visualization. The last one, what I want to show is that you can really mix extensions together. So not extensions, APIs together. So if you work with extensions, you can work with other APIs like the TabPy External Service API and do really cool things together. So again, this is a developer session. It's a Jedi session. So I'm sure that you are a huge fan of drag and drop things. But on the same time, you're even more happier to write a few lines of code if it makes more sense, which is like 99% of the time. So the question is that how can you do it in Tableau? I built like a very basic dashboard and a very basic extension, and the extension does nothing just to set one single parameter in my Tableau dashboard. That one dashboard parameter is applied to a script function, which executes a Python script. So this allows me to create like an interactive process session. I have my Python code here. This is again like the Bitcoin prices and the moving average calculated from this Python code. And if I change the number of days for the moving average in my Python code, like for 300 days, then it's automatically recalculate the dashboard. So I can practically do my iterative analysis using Python code without really moving out from the Tableau desktop, which is, I think, pretty cool. I can even do it for 365, even if it doesn't make any sense. But I really like that how the line is really changing. So, but this is something, but it's still not a Jupyter notebook. So how can we really build something which is like a real Jupyter notebook where we can see the different iteration and we can compare visualizations? And that's where we can add another API, the JavaScript API. So we can have JavaScript API, we can have an extension API, we can have the TabPy API, and create like a nice, let me just refresh it, a nice Jupyter notebook kind of experience. So I can add my block here, like first new block. This is my default visualization. And if I want to change something like sort the values, I can certainly do it. And it automatically calculates it. I can name my block. This is like the sort block. I can do comments and create like another block if I want to compare the values with something else. And here I can just, let's say, reverse the values. So here I can have unlimited number of visualization and compare my analysis. I have my Python code. I can save my notebook, and anytime when I'm coming back, I can reload it from anywhere I stored. So it's really looking like a notebook thing. And the fun fact that this whole UI was written by my colleague Gyula László, because I had no time last week just to make sure that we can show something cool in my presentation. So to build something like this takes not more than a night using Tableau APIs, and it still looks something useful. So that was all. Again, I had a lot of help from, obviously, from Chris and two of my colleagues, Julia and Shoma, and Yvette, who helped me designing the dashboards, but not the ones which are having dashboard when it's in their name. And yeah, I think that was it. Thank you very much for for being here. I know this is Friday. I know that we had like a tough past few days, so I really appreciate that you were able to make it. Thank you again.
Are we out of time?
Yep.
Do we have 8 minutes left? Is that right? Does anybody have any questions? We have a couple minutes.
So is your extension framework available?
The question was, is our extension framework available? How would you like to answer that?
Yes.
Yes.
What's it called?
The Tableau extension framework. I think you can Google it, actually. It's an NPM, right?
Yes, so we can share the link as well.
Yeah, we can.
So, and all the demos, what we did today are available on Chris or mine GitHub pages. So they are caring with sharing, if you know what I mean. So it's, and if we have time, which is obviously not going to happen, that we will create some blog posts about it and a nice explanation. Because as you see, I don't have that many README files explaining how to do it, but it's just a question of time.
There's a question over here. So the question was, does the extension work on mobile? Does the annotations work on mobile? Yes.
It does.
Which one, his or mine? Mine? Yeah, so you can see it. I honestly haven't tested if like the ad works. I would doubt it, to be honest. But you can view them. Yeah. Back in the back there. For which one? Okay.
What about the data security?
The data set we're reading?
So.
Oh, the data security. What about the security of the data?
Question. I expected the question, and thank you for it. So with the new sandbox extension, you can create extensions easily which are logged down from any network operations. So you can create really like jailed extensions which are safe. And on the same time, there is like another project on the GitHub done by Ben's team, so you can create like your own internal corporate sandbox extension hosting. When you can deploy your own extensions, and you can set where the extension can communicate, where it needs to communicate with an external service, so you can really fine-tune how the extensions can communicate with outside or inside services. So besides that, there is a lot of security settings on the server. So right now, with the sandboxing features, you can really fine-tune what the extensions can do. And by default, if you close down everything, then they cannot really do any outside communication. So for Kepler, if you set up that it can access the Mapbox maps, it can be sandboxed, and the annotation is also working really well in the sandbox environment because it's locked down. So extensions are secure since 2 months, I guess.
1 week?
For me, it seems like 2 months. But yes, they are secure since a while, but they are even more secure since a week.
Any other questions?
So if our IT say that no extension is something that we cannot use any extension.
If your IT seriously thinks that no, then yes. They have to enable it on the server, but right now you have really great explanation why they should do it.
They say it's unstable.
It's not.
When you say is it
it's not
unstable, do you mean is the extension unstable, or is the?
Yeah, they're afraid that when we install extension, it's harder for them to manage the server.
So that's where so the question is really around is the extension stable? Is that going to cause any problems? And the way I think I would answer that is there's a whitelisting capability on server, which would basically allow your IT partners to vet anything that is running as an extension in your Tableau environment before they enable it. So they should just have a process that they go through to do whatever security scans and checks are needed to evaluate the extension and then whitelist it. And that's, if they follow that path, they've done the same vetting process they would do for other applications that they're building in the company as well. So to me, it just kind of follows that standard process and it should be fine. Whether or not they're going to do that, I don't know, but that is like a pretty realistic path that could be taken. Yeah, back over there.
I'm new to this, so I just have a question. If it has any limitations with hybrid extracts versus live collection of your dashboards, or if I'm automating the dashboard on server, does it create any issues with that?
Okay, so the question is, does the data source matter whether it's a live or an extract, or if you're doing any type of like server automation, does it matter? I would say for the most part that shouldn't, because if you're using the like get data API and the extension API, like it doesn't necessarily matter where that data is coming from because you're in the Tableau dashboard ecosystem. The other thing I was going to say is, one thing I have noticed, I think, is if you're like printing the PDF, I don't know that the extension prints yet. So there may be some things around
Not yet.
how the, I mean, we could always make it work, right? But like,
Yes,
I don't know that it's going to work out of the box. But Tomas doesn't really work in boxes, so we're good.
Okay, thank you again, and we'll stay here if you have still questions.
Yeah,
We're
feel free
really
to come
happy
up if you have
answer.
others. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming.